Alexis, aka the Sloth Reader, and I'm here today to do my April wrap-up. So I have a lot of conflicted feelings about the ratings I've given most of the books in this pile, so instead of going by my least favorite to my favorite book this month, I'm just going to talk about them in the order I've read them, because like I said, for a lot of them I'm very unsure of a rating. Starting with the thing I DNF'd this month, that was A History of Loneliness by John Boyne. I read about 200 pages of this before I decided to DNF it, and I DNF'd this mostly because I was enjoying it, but it was taking me forever to read, and I realized that in pushing myself to finish reading this, I was letting a lot of the other books I wanted to read slide, and I just made an executive decision not to keep doing that. So I didn't hate this book or anything like that. I would still recommend it if the premise interests you, but I really appreciated this for an introduction to John Boyne because I'm very excited to read some of his other work now. Moving on to the first thing I completed in April, and that was Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. I of course started this a couple months ago and then put it on hold so I could do my literary March thing, and then I finished it the first day of April. And I ended up giving this one a 4 stars, and I think that's a good rating for this. I love, first and foremost, the diversity in this story. The main character, Alice, is black. She's also biromantic, asexual. Her love interest, Takumi, is Japanese American. This was really fun. I loved the relationship between Alice and Takumi. I thought they were so adorable. So many times when they were talking to each other, I was just gushing because I thought they were so cute. The reason I didn't give this 5 stars is because I wasn't totally satisfied by the ending of this book. Alice gets in confrontations with her friends and her family, and I don't really feel like either of those wrapped up satisfactorily for me. I kind of wish a little bit more had been done to really close out those two situations, and I don't feel like that was done. And a couple of other things I felt were just left a little too loose end for me. But I thought this was really cute. I highly recommend this, and I love the representation. The next book I finished in April was Obsidian by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is of course the third book in the Illuminae files, and I have to admit, I didn't really love this. I was pretty disappointed, to be honest. When I first finished it, I gave it 4 stars, but the more I sat on it, the more I realized it's honestly more of like a 3.5. because I honestly didn't enjoy the ending. I thought the ending was just not satisfying for me. There's 2 new characters, main characters that are introduced in this book. I don't really feel like I got to know either one. I don't really feel like I came to care about either one of them. And so all of the time I was spent with that felt disappointing because I wasn't with the other characters that I genuinely liked. Also, other people have made this complaint, and it's 100% valid. This book is so much of the security footage that's just traditional writing that was really disappointing. I would say half of this book is analyzing security footage, which is like the novelty that was with Illuminae of like having this book be in a format and being unique really wore off on me for this book because there really just wasn't as much of it. So ultimately I think I'm gonna go with a 3.5 for this one. I still enjoyed it more than Gemina, but neither of them honestly have been nearly as good as Illuminae in my opinion. The next book I finished was an audio read, and that was Soundless by Rochelle Mead, and I ended up giving this one 2 stars. This was just really not good in my opinion. The world and the characters and the lore all felt very surface level. This is a very short book. I don't even think it's 300 pages, and I think that shows. I think that it kind of felt like everything was just half thought out. I don't feel like the characters were well-rounded. I don't feel like the world was fully explored, fully explained, and the ending was a little too much of a deus ex machina for me. So yeah, this was a 2 stars. I would not recommend this one. Next I read The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wong, and this is a graphic novel that is so cute. I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. The art style in this is super pretty, and it's so cute, and the story is absolutely adorable. It does have a really unique story about a prince in the turn-of-the-century Paris who likes to wear dresses, and the dressmaker who makes his dresses, and like the bond between them and stuff. And it's a lot about discovering who you are and what your dreams and your wants are, and I really enjoyed all of that. My only drawback is I do wish it would have gone a little bit deeper on an emotional level. I do feel like the emotions were pretty surface level. I feel like the turmoil the characters were feeling could have been just drawn out a little bit more for my taste, which is why I didn't give it a 5, but I think this is so cute and I highly recommend it. The next one I'm going to mention was my reread for April, and that was Tithe by Holly Black. This is the first book in her Modern Fairy Tale series, and this is one of the ones that's hard for me to rate because I think in honesty this book is like a 3.5, but I read this book over 10 years ago, and rereading it this time for me was really nostalgic, and I was like, I could read this book and acknowledge why 13-year-old me probably really liked it, and so I ended up giving it a 4 for nostalgia. But I do still think this is highly worth the read. It's really interesting too because this was written in like 2003, and so I think it's interesting to read this and then to go back and read Holly Black's later works, and to see, you know, what in her style has changed and what in her style has remained the same. This is still really dark. There are a couple of like pretty racist things that are said by bad characters, and it's never like officially called out in that characters are like, hey, that's racist, but you're definitely led to infer that it's not nice people saying it. It's not like a character you're supposed to like who's saying it, but I did figure I would go ahead and mention that. And one of the characters does use the F slur about himself, which was honestly a little off-putting for me, but, you know, is it an excuse that it was written in 2003? Possibly not, but I don't think Holly Black meant it from a place of maliciousness, but I did figure I would go ahead and mention those things. But I still did give this one a 4 because, like I said, reading it, I was just like, wow, I can see why 13-year-old me really liked this book. So, yes. The next book I'm going to mention was another one I listened to on audiobook, and that was Dredd Nation by Justina Ireland, and I ended up giving this one a 4 stars as well. The best way I can explain this is that I didn't love the first half, and then I loved the second half. The first half for me was a little slow. I wasn't really sure where the book was going, and I didn't really like the stagnant feel that it kind of had for me. I also was not the hugest fan of the main character Jane. The best way I can explain it is that the main character Jane is very much a Slytherin. I think Slytherins will love her, but for me, as a Hufflepuff, she was a little too Slytherin for my taste. She did a lot of things and she made a lot of decisions that were off-putting to me because I was like, that's a little evil. That's a little malicious. And so that's the best way I can explain it, is that I think Slytherins will love her. Me as a Hufflepuff, she was a little too aggressively Slytherin for my taste. But being said, I loved the second half of this book. The second half of this book kind of does like really settle in on a direction, and I really liked the direction it took. I really liked the character growth that Jane undergoes in the second half. I love the things we get to see from other characters. There's a character who comes out as Arrow Ace in this book who was my favorite character the whole time, so I was like, yay! Jane too, I believe the author has said, is bisexual. She just makes a couple of comments through the book about being attracted to women as well as men, and so I figured I would mention those things as well. But I did read Dredd Nation. I did really enjoy it. It was a really good read. Highly recommend the audiobook. The next book I read in the month of April was A Torch Against the Night by Saba Tahir. This is another one I'm kind of conflicted on the rating for because this is like a 400 and something page book, and I feel like the first 350 pages for me was a 3.5, and honestly my biggest complaint with this book is I can't stand the love rectangle going on between the like characters. This is a series for me that feels like a man and a woman character, two characters of opposite genders can't be friends without being romantically interested in one another, and that is kind of the case. I feel like every time a man and a woman character talked in this book, they were immediately romantically interested in each other, and that is exhausting and unoriginal, and so I really disliked that. I loved the last 100 or so pages. The last 100 or so pages for me were like a 5-star read because I just enjoyed them so much. And I also will say that I loved the introduction of Helene's character point of view in this story. I wish Helene would have been a POV character in the first book, because I grew to love her immensely in this book. She became one of my favorite characters. I wish I could have loved her in the first book as much. So I'm torn between a 3.5 and a 4 for this one. I'm gonna go with 4 because I ended it with really positive expectations, but like I said, those first 300 pages were like a 3.5. They were pretty rough for me, but I'm very excited to see what's gonna happen in A Reaper at the Gates, because the ending of this book is madness. Saba Tahir knows how to write mad endings. I will just say that, because like I said, the last 100 pages in this were bomb. And coming up on the last book I read in April, that was An Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. And this is another one I'm very conflicted about. First off, I loved the representation in this book. I am a plus-sized, anxious, pansexual girl, and I loved seeing that in this book. I loved Molly's being on anxiety medication for her anxiety and also being plus-sized, and I felt like a lot of her thoughts were very relatable to me. You know, feelings like when you're on a date and you're so self-conscious about your body, feeling like you can't wear certain items of clothing because of how self-conscious about your body you are, and I really related to that. And then Molly's sister Cassie, who is a lesbian, her love interest is pansexual, and that was incredible for me to see. I think this is the first book I've officially read with a pansexual character in it, which is amazing for me. So I loved those things a lot. But I don't really feel like I ever really liked the characters. I didn't really like Molly, and I strongly disliked her sister Cassie. Her sister Cassie was awful, in my opinion. Like, I legitimately was like, wow, I'm glad I don't have a twin sister, for fear that they could potentially be like Cassie. I thought she was awful to Molly, and she never really apologized for being awful to Molly. And so that was super off-putting to me. And I also felt like this book was really juvenile to me. I felt like the things that the characters were doing and saying and how they were reacting to certain situations, and even being someone who's anxious and plus-sized, I couldn't relate to Molly's having 26 crushes that she never acts on. And I don't know if my feelings of this feeling juvenile are because I'm in my 20s, but at the same time, I feel like if I read this book at 17, I would have had the same feelings. And it's like, I read Simon Versus again back in January, and I still loved it, and it didn't feel juvenile to me, but then I read this one, and the characters just acted really immature, and they just acted so much younger than they were supposed to be in this book. And so I ended up giving this one a 3 stars, but I don't know if I should make it higher because I'm not the target audience for this. I don't know. I'm really conflicted about this one, but for me it just ended up being a 3 stars. Alrighty guys, so that is my April wrap-up. I know I went through everything in this very fast, but I am on a crunch because I have to be somewhere in like an hour, and I still have to edit and upload this. So I'm running out of time, so I had to talk very fast. I would love to know what was your least favorite and your favorite reads in April. If you like what I do, upload videos on Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, and I'll see you guys soon with another one. Bye!